This video will be a quick run-through on everything that you need to know regarding the kidney, including its structure and function. I made many other small videos that explains each of these processes more slowly if you want to check them out, if this video doesn't help you understand everything, because it's going to be a quick run-through. It's not going to be as slow as the other videos I made. So, the model of this video will be Jack Sparrow, Captain Jack Sparrow. Okay, he's gonna help us explain everything we need to know. Now, before we get there, remember the kidney is simply a filter. It's a slightly more complicated filter than the everyday life one we know. Okay, an everyday life filter separates things by size, right? The kidney does more than that. It separates things by good and bad, because in our body, we have a lot of things, good and bad things, but we don't want to keep the bad things. We want to get rid of the bad things. So if we look at these things here and consider the red things as bad things and the green things, these green shapes, as good things, essentially, if this was our kidney, it would work like this. The good things will not pass through. It'll stay in our body, but the bad things will get filtered out. So the bad things will leave our body. That's essentially what our kidney does, okay? So, first of all, let's get into it now. Here we have Captain Jack Sparrow. Let's look at the inside of Captain Jack Sparrow and see what's going on. So here we have the urinary system. So we've got the kidney, the bladder, the thing connecting the kidney and the bladder, and then some big vessels here, some blood vessels, okay? I'm gonna look, since I don't like looking at things small because it makes me confused, I like to zoom in on them. So here I have the same picture zoomed in, okay? So here we have the kidney. And again, it's connected to the bladder. We have two of them, two kidneys situated in the back of our abdomen, okay? In the back of our abdomen. And they have this purpose of filtering our bloodstream. So like I said, our bloodstream, remember, so this one here, this is one of the vessels, has a lot of things in it, good and bad. And as it travels, it can send blood to our brain, our arms, our legs to give it energy, because we know inside our blood there's a lot of good things that our body needs, nutrients our body needs. But to filter out these bad things, there will be a small branch that goes in like this, and it will enter the kidney. And the kidney will be smart, it's a filter, so it's going to take out all of the bad things from our blood. So it's going to take out all the bad things that come in and put it in this thing here, which will go to our bladder and we pee it out. But all the good things it will take and put into this blue vessel here, which will stay in our body and be part of our bloodstream, okay? So that's essentially what it does. Now, regarding some structure, if we take this kidney and we cut it open to see what it looks like on the inside, we can see these two, you see this red and the blue vessel that went in. So here they are. This is the red one, this is the blue one. The blue one is called the renal vein. Renal, by the way, this confuses a lot of people, but renal is just a synonym. It means the same thing as kidney. So kidney vein, kidney artery. The vein is the one that's going to come out of the kidney with the filtered blood, meaning it's clean. It has no dirty things in it, no bad things. And the red one has the good and bad things in. So essentially what happens then is this red one comes in, it branches to very small vessels all the way to here. And then here is going to be something very important called the nephron, which I'll talk about very soon. The nephron is going to be the little filter that's going to transfer all the good things into the blue vessel. So the blue vessel will come out then and go back into our bloodstream as this big vein. Now, where the bad things go? The bad things was sent by the nephron into this thing here, okay? This is called the medulla. So the medulla is this word. So I tried to color code it as much as possible. The medulla is this one. The medulla leads into this space here called the renal pelvis, okay, this dark spot. This renal pelvis will then drain into this ureter. Your ureter is this thing here. Your ureter will ultimately lead to your bladder, okay? So overall, your nephron removed the bad things, drained them into here so it can go out your ureter, and the good things was put into the blue vessel, which drained out here and entered back into your main bloodstream, okay? Now, what is this outer part of the kidney called? This outer part is the cortex, okay? The cortex. So the most outer layer, the cortex, then this little part, these little segments here are called called the medulla, and then the other names are, I already mentioned. okay? So this is the main structures you need to know about the kidney. Now, let's move on. So I mentioned there was something very important here that does the filtering, right? And that's called the nephron. So this is the nephron. We'll talk about this one in more detail just now. So this segment here, in between this part and this part, right here, is where the nephron is. So in between the cortex and the medulla, that's where this magic filter is, the filtering machine of our body. We call it the functional unit because it is the thing that does all the work. It's the functional unit, okay? It's the thing doing the whole job. This is our filter. This is essentially our filter. Okay. Now, here I zoomed into it because I said I don't like to look at things small because it makes it look so complicated. So I made it nice and big here for us to see all the parts. So again, color-coded. This red part is the glomerulus. What is the glomerulus? Remember, I said here, this blood, our artery blood that has good and bad things in it, needs to be filtered, right? So it comes in and branches off super tiny, and eventually it reaches the nephron. So this little red part is this vessel that was branched off so many times and eventually reached it and goes into it. Okay, so this little vessel here that goes into it, this is this vessel, just a small branched version. So this vessel has a lot of good and bad things in it, coming in like this, and then coiling up like this, and then leaving, okay? So that's pretty much what this red part means. Now the Bowman's capsule is this little part here, okay? We're gonna get into exactly what this means very soon. Then we have, so this is like an empty space, okay? So then it links to this part called the proximal convoluted tubule. Why is it called the proximal convoluted tubule? Proximal because proximal means close. So if this is the start of the nephron, this is the first pipe. So we consider it proximal. It's the closest pipe. Convoluted means all wiggly and weird in shape. So it's proximal weirded shape tubule, proximal convoluted tubule, or short PCT. It leads into this part here, this little loop, this little U-shaped loop called the loop of Henle, okay? Then this loop of Henle eventually links into this little squiggly thing here. Looks very similar to this part, just it's far away. Yep, that's why they call it the distal convoluted tubule. It's also convoluted, really weird in shape, and it's just far away. It's not close to the beginning, so it's distal. And then finally, the distal convoluted tubule leads into this collecting tubule called the collecting tubule. And let me make things clear here. So remember, the nephron is around here, okay? I'm gonna make it a bit smaller to make it clear. So it's like here, okay, between the cortex and medulla. And this thing here, the collecting tubule, as you can see, leads into the medulla because whatever passes through this nephron and reaches the this collecting tubule will pass into this space, and then into this space, and then into this space, into your bladder, and you'll pee it out, okay? So that's what the collecting tubule leads into. So far, so good. Now, let's look at the glomerulus. We're gonna look at each segment real brief, real quick. So the glomerulus, so it's pretty much, like I said, it's this little red part here. It's a little artery that has your good and bad things in it. Now, like I said, let's look at it big. So I'm going to zoom into this part here, okay? So now we're all zoomed in, okay? Slightly bigger. Now, we have the afferent, oh yeah, by the way, this picture here of the nephron, it's real big, right? They're not actually this big relative to the kidney. We actually have like millions of these in one kidney. So they're much, much smaller than this. But obviously I need to make it like this so you can understand what's going on. Just bear in mind, it's much smaller than that. It's like much smaller, and we have a million of them, okay? That's actually why if you're missing one kidney, it's actually all right, because one kidney can work by itself good enough for your body. You don't need two, but just in case, we always have to. Okay, so now we have this blood, right? I mentioned before, this is the tricky part now. So we have this blood vessel with all the good and bad things in, coming in, branching off super tiny until it gets here and reaches the nephron, okay? So that's where we are now. Here we are, goes in. It's got a lot of things in it, so these things represent nutrients. The green things good, the red things bad, okay? So it goes in by the afferent arteriole. Why afferent? How can we remember afferent and efferent? Efferent is the one going out, afferent is the one going in. Because A for approach, E for exit, okay? Real simple. So now it goes in, and it goes into this, and it coils up real good like this. And you can see that there are 3 layers, essentially. The vessel, this green layer, and then this blue layer, okay? Whatever is inside your blood, good or bad, has an opportunity to exit your vessel and pass through it, and then pass through this green layer and the blue layer, and then it will be inside this space, okay? Now, what kind of things can leave? Small things. So, let me show you. Here we have the 3 layers. The first layer will be the vessel, so we can pretend essentially in here, in this space. So I'm zooming into this spot here, okay? Zooming into this spot. So we can pretend right here is the vessel. So let me show you. I want to make it clear as possible. So this is the inside of the vessel. So inside here we got a lot of nutrients, good and bad. So let's take one. Here's a good nutrient, okay? This good nutrient, if it's small, and this bad nutrient, if it's small enough, it will pass through all 3 layers. Do you think this one's small enough? Yeah, I think so, it is. So it will pass through this layer, and that layer, and then guess where it ends up now? In this space, okay? So basically, these 3 layers pretty much serve as a filter for small things. So everything small will pass through, everything big won't be able to. So let's use a big molecule. This is a bad big molecule. Now, it can pass the first layer, but definitely not the second one. So this one will stay and leave through the efferent, okay? Then we have a good molecule here. What's going to happen to it? It's small enough. If we rotate it, it could pass through, right? So it's going to go through. It will end up in there as well. And same with this one. Same with this really tiny one. And then maybe this good molecule that our body likes to keep also leaves because it can't pass through. So you just need to know there are 3 layers that serves as a filter for the molecules inside your blood, okay? The capillary itself, so the pipe itself, it needs to pass out of the pipe first. Then it passes through a basement membrane and then the podocytes, okay, the last layer. Now, your question might be, okay, why can stuff pass out here but not here? Like, what if all the stuff just leaves here? That's a good question. The difference is the capillaries here, so the vessels here, are permeable. They have small holes, whereas these don't, okay? So nothing will pass out here. This is a special type of capillary that allows certain things to pass, okay? So the glomerulus, in a nutshell, is a size filter. So this is the closest thing to a real live house filter, okay? This is the first stage. So the first stage of the nephron is a filter by size. So all the good things, all the small things, good or bad, will pass through, and all the bad things, good or bad, will not pass through and will stay in your blood. Now you might ask me, well, what's the purpose of this? I thought we want to get rid of bad things and not good things. This will help you. This will become clear in the later stages, okay? Because in the later stages, you'll see your body is capable of taking out these good things and putting it back in your bloodstream, okay? Even though it was filtered and put in the nephron here. Now, lastly, there's a size difference. The afferent arteriole is much bigger than the efferent arteriole. And this is done so that the blood pools up here, okay? Because if you imagine a long pipe and you squeeze one side, that will cause the water not be able to pass through the narrow edge, and it will build up in the rest of the pipe. That's the same here. If we make this part narrow, everything will build up in here, and this will make it easier to filter blood. Otherwise, if it wasn't like that, the blood will just go and quickly pass before it will quickly exit before it can even get filtered, okay? So, it's a size filter. That's all you got to know for this part. Okay, these are things that can pass. These are things that cannot pass. Okay, I'm not going to go over them because it'll take some time. Now, proximal convoluted tubule. So we get to this part now. So, bear in mind, the vessel that just exited, so the stuff, remember, they exit and they continue on in this vessel. This vessel will come and meet up with the proximal convoluted tube. Because remember, I said there are some bad things, some good things that got filtered and ended up in here, and we want to put them back into the bloodstream. Our body wants to keep it. It doesn't want to get rid of it, because whatever stays in a nephron will get peed out eventually, so we want to remove it as soon as possible. So here I zoom into this part. Okay, I'm zooming into this part. We've got the proximal convoluted tube, the blood. All the good things will get absorbed. They'll get, oh crap, ignore that for now. But all the good things, so there's a bunch of cells here that line the tube, and they will absorb the good thing and send it into the bloodstream, okay? and none of the bad things. So all the good things, I'll just move it. All the good things will be absorbed. All the bad things will not, okay? Because we don't want them. So far, so good. Now we get to the loop of Henle. This is the complicated part, so you might have to watch my individual video on this if this doesn't make sense. Now, I put a line here to separate the two parts of the nephron. This part is always located in the medulla, whereas this part is located in the cortex. Let me show you. So here I have it. You see the loop? It's hanging inside the medulla, whereas the rest of it is in the cortex. Okay, this is actually true. This is how it works. Okay, so just bear that in mind as well. So what happens in this little loop? So I zoomed into this kind of zone here. We have the proximal tube, the loop of Henle, distal tube, and then we got the collecting duct. So real brief, because this is a complicated process. The loop of Henle is specifically made to be able to make the outside of the loop, so everywhere outside, so here, 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 it's made to make it to make a concentration gradient. So it's meant to make the top the least concentrated, and as you go deeper, it makes it more concentrated with ions. Okay, just like this. Okay, so everywhere. I'm showing it here, but remember, it applies everywhere. How does it do that? It does that by these pumps here being water permeable, meaning only water can leave through here, and then these pumps, only ions can leave. So let me show you. So if we have, for example, our bloodstream going down, here we have some water coming from our proximal tube. Since it's very little concentrated here, only a little bit of water might leave. Not much, because we know water travels by osmosis to even out concentration gradients. Now, as we go lower, it gets more and more concentrated outside. So by the time we get to the bottom, a lot of water will leave because it's so concentrated that the water wants to even out the outside. Now, by the time we get then to the bottom, we have some water left and still a lot of ions because the ions were not allowed to pass out through here. So, but on this side, they are. On this side, the water cannot leave, but the ions can. So if I show you this, the ions will now get pumped out. And right here, we have so many ions, so many, right? Because none of it left yet. As we go to the first pumps, the first layer, here, they have so much option to choose from. So many ions, because they're all still here. And so it'll pump out some, okay? So it'll pump out a lot because it has so much to choose from. So essentially, by that logic, we can form a lot of concentration, a lot. But then when the fluid gets to this level, there's not as much ions left. So these pumps don't have that much to choose from. So they pump slightly less. So they're going to pump these. Okay? And then we get higher, and it's going to pump even less because there's even less to choose from. We're running out of ions. So it'll become 3, 2, 1. Okay? So that is pretty much how the loop of Henle creates this concentration gradient. And now you'll ask me, okay, why? What was the whole purpose of this? This purpose is super important when we get to this last part here. You'll see just now, okay? I'm going to get to that part just now. Now, distal convoluted tubule. That's this little segment here. Real simple, real easy. Almost going to spend no time on this one. By the way, let me show you. Again, always remember, the vessel follows this nephron the whole time, okay? Because otherwise, the stuff that leaves will not be able to go anywhere. The stuff that leaves this tubule needs to enter the bloodstream somehow because that's where everything is stored. Okay, so remember, the vessel will always follow the nephron. Okay, distal convoluted tubule, so this part. What happens here, so I'm zooming into like this segment now, okay? The blood vessel and the distal tube. What happens here is two things. Let me show you. So, salt gets absorbed. Salts that include sodium, chloride ions, calcium. So this here represents all those three things. They get absorbed and taken into the bloodstream. Potassium and hydrogen get excreted. Why? Hydrogen, the more acidic your blood. So if you don't excrete hydrogen from your bloodstream, your blood will become very acidic and you will die. Okay? Potassium, why? If we have too much potassium in our bloodstream, we will not have proper neuron action potentials, because potassium is involved in neuron action potentials, as you will learn later. So we got to get rid of them, otherwise we'll have problems there. We want to absorb calcium because our muscles need calcium to contract. Sodium and chloride are used to keep the osmolarity of our blood proper. Otherwise, we won't have the proper osmolarity or action potentials, because they're also used for action potentials. A key tip for this, I would say, one-letter ions, so potassium and hydrogen, get excreted into the tubule. Two-letter ions, such as sodium, chloride ions, and calcium, get absorbed. Okay? That's it. Now we get to the last part, collecting duct. I said to understand collecting duct, you need to understand the loop of Henle. Let's go back to it. So remember, in the loop of Henle, we created this concentration gradient. Okay? The lower you go, the more concentrated. Why? Because the collecting duct is so special in that it can decide whether it wants water to leave or not. So, if it wants water to leave, that means water will exit and you will pee less. If it wants water not to leave, it will keep water and you will pee more. Do you understand? So, how does it decide whether it wants water to leave or stay? So, it doesn't decide. Your brain does. Let me show you. So here we have SpongeBob. He's going to be our brain. Let's look inside here of his brain. Here is his brain. Let's say SpongeBob is starving with water. He doesn't have any water. He's so dehydrated. So what's going to happen is he has little vessels in his brain that's going to send signals to a specific part of his brain called the pituitary gland, the posterior pituitary gland. These vessels can sense if you have enough water in your blood. So if it senses that you don't have, that SpongeBob does not have enough water, it will tell this gland, this posterior pituitary gland, to do something about it. So this posterior pituitary gland will send something called ADH into the blood. Okay? Oh yeah, by the way, these vessels that can sense if there's enough water have something called osmoreceptors. These osmoreceptors can sense if they have enough water or not. Okay? So, he's very dehydrated. Now his brain secreted something called ADH. ADH is this thing here, okay? So it's secreted from his brain. It travels down this vessel. It enters here into the kidney. It travels in the kidney. It branches off. Eventually it reaches the nephron. Okay, so let's say, okay, it reaches now the nephron. I want to show this clearly. It reached the nephron. Now it's going to go into the nephron. It's not going to get filtered. This molecule does not really get filtered. So it goes around here, blah, 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 keeps following it. And eventually it reaches the vessel right next to the collecting tubule. And now it can enter. Okay, so let me show you. So here we have it. Let me copy it. A second. So here we have it. So it's now in the vessel here, next to the tubule, and now it can enter. When this molecule, ADH, reaches this tubule cells will start making something called aquaporins. Okay? They are basically little pores, as the name says, little pipes that let water leave. Okay? So, guess what? If ADH comes, more of these are made. Now water can leave. And what does this mean if water leaves? This means water will leave the tubule and go into this space, or this space, anywhere outside this tubule, and it will be able to enter our bloodstream. Let me show you again here. Okay, so it can be on both sides. So it doesn't mean just this side. It can be everywhere. So now let's say, if it's very concentrated, high, that means only a little bit of water can leave up here, right? But as we go down, it gets more concentrated by this loop of Henle that we talked about before. So by the time we get to the bottom, it is so concentrated that so much water can leave until the outside is diluted. Okay, so by that logic, now we can get a lot of water to leave and enter our bloodstream, and now we are hydrated again. So now SpongeBob will be hydrated. By this logic, you can imagine animals that have really long loop of Henles that go really far down will have such a big concentration gradient that they can conserve almost all their water when they're thirsty. Whereas humans, even if we're kind of dehydrated, we still pee, right? Because our loop of Henles are not that long, which means we can't absorb all of our water. It's not concentrated enough. Okay, so we'll always pee out a little bit. How can you remember ADH? So ADH stands for antidiuretic hormone. People just can't remember this name, so I'll tell you a name called anti-dehydration hormone, because your body makes this hormone when you are dehydrated so that you become anti-dehydrated. Okay, this is not the real name, but this is a way I think you can remember it. So now, assuming that this happened, now SpongeBob is happy, he's got water, and whatever's left passes down where? Whatever's left will pass down into the ureter, like into this space, because it leaves it here now, into the medulla, into this space, into the ureter, and finally from the ureter down into the bladder. And now, whenever you're ready, you can decide to pee. Okay? So that is the whole cycle of what your kidney does and the main structures. Okay? Here's some things. These things can stimulate ADH production, and these things can inhibit it. That's why when you drink a lot of alcohol, you tend to pee a lot because you make a lot of ADH, whereas if you're stressed, you can't pee. All of these make sense, but I'm not going to explain them. I made videos on these. So yes, this was a quick run through, so a lot of things maybe didn't make sense for you because I ran through it quickly, but if you want to get sense of these specific ones, I made videos on them slowly and carefully, so I hope this made sense and I hope it helped.